Hi, this is Jordan Moorhead, and this is the Austin Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today we have Travis Smith on. He's in so many different spaces of real estate here in Austin. He's going to tell us all about it and how he's crushing it here right now in this current market. So, hey, Travis, how are you?
Fantastic. How you doing, Jordan?
Good to see you again. I know it's been a little while. Um, could you tell our guests who you are and how you're involved with real estate investing?
Yes, so I'm Travis Smith. I own Hammersmith Construction, which is a construction full service residential company um, that works quite a bit with investors. And then we also have some retail, do some new builds, and we're doing some modulars as well, which are some pretty fantastic and I think cutting edge new builds that are coming along. I also am a producing licensed real estate agent, and I did 11 million sales this year production. And I own a design company and a flooring company as well that kind of tie into what Hammersmith does.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know we've done a few projects together. You guys did a single family with an ADU for me in East Austin. And
Yep.
then actually the property I'm sitting in right now, a duplex in South Austin. And you
Yep.
work with a couple of our clients here too. And a good friend of mine, Mark Missidall, works with you.
Yes,
So,
he is now as you know, a partial owner of the company,
mhm.
and an amazing person. It's pretty awesome how many good people Minneapolis puts out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Awesome. Well, you're involved with a lot around the construction and you do some flips too, huh? Right?
Yes, I have completed 34 as either personal or partnership, and then we've done another 15 as a construction company.
That's awesome. So yeah, you're heavily involved in real estate here in Austin. Um, Other than having the business here in Austin, why invest in Austin? Because you can really invest anywhere anymore. So why continue to invest in Austin?
Because honestly, I don't think there is going to be a better time than now and over the next couple of months. I personally believe that we'll see there's a high volatility in the housing market and the interest rates. And I know we all saw how it went up and we've all seen how it comes down. But that volunteer volatility won't be over just because it went up and then went down. As you know, it'll even itself out over time. And right now, some of the prices and the deals that you can find in Austin are prices that you haven't been able to see in 4 or 5 years. And there are people that I work with, investors, people I call the smart money, and they're gobbling up places. Right now, you can get a place sub 400 a Mueller. You can get a place in the 78745 for 300K, rough shape. But
Mhm.
these are these are prices, like I said, we haven't seen since before COVID. Honestly, probably about a year before COVID. So,
Mhm. Yeah, no, there's some great deals out there here right now.
yep.
Um, and yeah, I'm looking for more deals for myself here now too. But Travis, what initially got you started and what attracted you to real estate investing in general? So I don't know your background actually. Come to talk about it. I've just known you as Travis, who owns Hammersmith Construction and
Yeah,
flips houses and does all that stuff. So how did you get to real estate investing?
it's kind of interesting. When I was living in Victoria, because I lived down there until 2017, I had met a good friend of mine in Houston, and I was doing some investing in the stock market for him. And it went really well. And I told him, I was getting my license and I was going to move to Austin. And we decided to try and flip some houses. And for the first three of those, I lost a substantial amount of money and did terrible because I got taken advantage of by contractors. I didn't quite understand the full scope of what I was doing. I didn't have a mentor in place to kind of guide me through that.
Mhm.
And so I learned the old fashioned way, and that was paying for it through blood, sweat, and tears. And then from that, and towards the end of the third flip that I had done, this was basically a first set of three. I met Scott. As you know, he had a lot of experience in construction, and he was the first person who actually did what said he was going to do. And we got to talking and realized that we both thought there was a ton of improvement in the construction and contracting community because, as you know, here in Texas, you don't have to be licensed to be a contractor. There's a lot of really bad people out there. So if we could be a good person that does what we say we're going to do it quickly and for a decent price, we'd always have some business, and that's served us pretty well so far.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And you did mention something a lot of people don't know is that you don't need to have a license to be a contractor in Austin.
Yep,
People say, "Hey, I want a licensed contractor to do it." It's
all the
like,
time.
tough luck. You don't need a license to be a contractor here. And that differs per Texas cities. But Austin, you don't need a license to be a contractor. So I can just put on a different shirt here today and walk out the door and say, "Hey, I'm a contractor."
Yep. I
And
have had a couple of investors in the past that I've worked with who saw what I did and thought it would be simple. On one house, it didn't work out so well for him, and on the other one, I'm not so sure. But it is not quite as easy as everybody thinks it looks.
no, definitely not. So that being said, I think we can talk a little bit about that. So right now, people are saying, "Hey, stuff's so expensive to get done. It takes forever. Uh, why are people ripping me off left and right?" Can you talk a little bit about just where costs have gone and why that's happened and why things are so complicated right now to get done?
Yes. So, as we all know, there was quite a bit of inflation in raw materials, things like lumber and copper, over the last couple of years, in part because of monetary, in part because of supply issues. But lumber at one point was up to, I think, 1,500 a board foot, and now it's back down to 400. So we're actually seeing a retreat in material costs, not so
Mm,
much on the copper side, but definitely on the lumber side. The millwork, I think, will start to follow that. I think we're going to see a drop in material cost where I
mm,
don't think we'll see the prices come back down unless something changes in the job market is the cost of labor right now, which you and I have discussed before, is
mm,
gotten for good work has gotten to be, pretty expensive.
mhm.
So that's kind of what the driver is of it right now, is more the labor market than the materials. I know there's a lot of people who like to point to materials, and there's still a couple of things that are hard to acquire, but for the most part, materials are back to where they've been, and the prices have started to normalize quite a bit as well. Where it's still sticky is in the labor market portion of it.
And I think, just diving into that a little bit can help people understand why prices have gone up so much. So we don't have to talk specific dollar amounts, but percentage wise, let's say just for labor, where was it and where has it gone for what types of labor that you need?
So we used to have, a good person we would pay 150 to 200 a day when we were starting out, and now that's more like 350, 400 even for somebody who's really skilled.
Wow. Yeah. So more than 100% increase on a lot of these costs.
Yes. And I have tried to go the cheaper route. I have tried to, as you know, we constantly, where we interview people, we go through, but what we found is if to get the kind of finish and execution that our investors and clients expect, then we need to have those kind of people. And what it does allow us to do is they are turning out high quality houses, whole house
Mhm.
remodels in 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
So, and that's going really well for us. And that's also something that's improved even since we worked with you on the duplex.
Mhm.
Is, at the time we were subcontracting out. Now it's much more of an in-house crew type thing, and the systems and routines are better, so everything's just streamlined. And yeah, it takes us about 4 to 6 weeks for a whole house at this point.
That's really fast. And that's awesome. And time is money. So I think
Yes.
people say, "Oh, I'm paying more for this job to get done." But like you said, if it can get done in 4 to 6 weeks versus 12 or 14 weeks, that's a big difference.
Yeah, especially if somebody's on hard money, as you know, that's hundreds of dollars a day.
Yeah.
And so it is literally part of our deal to race as fast as we can to get those done.
So you mentioned hard money, and I think that's something that a lot of flippers use. So hard money is it's typically interest only. Let's say it's right now, what do you see in 10, 12% interest?
Yeah, we had it down for experienced flippers. I typically go with Kelly Smith over Easy Street, and
Mhm.
I had it at 2.8% before all the rises, and now I think it's back to at least for me it was 2 and 12 or 2 and 11, somewhere around
Mhm.
there. So
Yeah, no, we were getting amazing deals from private money lenders here in the last year or two, and I said, "This is
yep,
crazy. This is like basically a normal interest rate, and now it's back up into the double digits."
yeah.
So for hard money, I know you do a lot of flips. Could you kind of talk about the flips you've done in Austin and what you learned about that? And we can go into the new builds and modulars too here later.
Yeah. So for the flips, when we used hard money, it obviously applies a lot more pressure than a cash only deal,
Mhm.
because the holding costs are there. It also eats into the margin. So that's something that when we're shopping for a house, we take that into account if we're using hard money financing. We need that much more margin onto the deal because you want to make sure you make a certain amount or else the flip's not worth it.
Mhm.
And so that comes into the equation. And then also, as you know, different hard money lenders work differently. And so with somebody like Easy Street, they can fund a draw the same day. I have worked with other investors that their hard money companies can take up to 2 weeks. And as you can imagine, if it takes 2 weeks to receive money, it slows the project down.
Mhm.
So there are, it's incredible to me. I think just in the past few projects, we've worked with 4 or 5 different hard money people through various investors, and it's pretty wild to me how what variances there are between them, their mode of operations, and the quality of the execution. To be honest with you,
Oh, yeah, I didn't know there was that much of a difference with hard money. Um,
it really is.
so with these flips, I know you're finding flips on market and off market.
Mhm.
Do you have any sort of criteria you aim for on a flip? Like, are you trying to get it at 70% ARV minus construction cost, or is there a formula you aim for on a flip?
Yeah, we actually try to get all in. It was 70 up until last year, and then
Mhm.
we tried to bump it down to 60 just because of, as quickly as prices are rising, it was bringing to mind that, like, how sustainable is this? And we wanted to make sure if there was a pullback, we'd be in position for that. And then this year, luckily, we did get stuck in a couple of deals that we've had to refinance into Airbnbs, but both of those we got in. We were all in, I think, at like no more than 55% on one and less than 50% on the other. And
Yeah.
so even with the drawdown and the values right now, we were able to get out of those, set up appropriately, and then we'll hold those until the market recovers and sell those. The shame is if we could have been buying now, then we would be selling in the spring for much better prices than currently, because
Mhm.
I do think spring is going to be very active this year.
Mhm. So you've had a few flips here recently, and if I read you right, that it didn't make sense to sell, it just made sense to hold on to them and sell later.
Correct. One, what actually, yeah, one was in 78745, an area that I know you're really familiar with.
Yeah.
We bought it in April. We had sold comps between 850 and 925.
Wow.
Finished it in 6 weeks, early June. But as you know, by the time June was here, it was already dropping off.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I comped it off of sold comps instead of actives, put it on at 825. We got a ton of traffic, and some really good feedback. And then it just started to fall off. And I started noticing that the flips around us were down mid to low sevens. And we always make sure we have multiple exit strategies so we don't get forced into taking a loss.
Mhm.
And so that's when we just kind of pivoted towards rentals and making sure we can just start paying down a little bit of the equity, and then 6 months, a year from now, however we want to go about doing it, whenever the market recovers and we can get the ARV we originally wanted, we'll sell it then.
Awesome. Cool. No, it's awesome to have that backup plan too. And
Yes, I recommend to a lot of the investors I work with. I know some of them they only want to do flips, and that's cool, but I always recommend having a backup plan just in case you have a macroeconomic situation like this where nobody has control over that. Nobody does anything wrong. Things
Mhm.
just the atmosphere changes, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's a good lead into our my next question here. What's something you tell people on how to avoid issues with flips, or what do you look for to avoid issues with flips, other than having a good backup plan? Say they're going to buy their first flip and they're working with a contractor that they've never met before, maybe they got recommended from. How will you best work with a contractor on a flip to avoid problems later on in the process?
Well, some of the first things that we look to avoid in a house is things like aluminum wiring, cast iron pipes. If it's going to be a buy and hold, water heaters in the attic. We like to check the age of the HVAC, and I almost always get an engineer report on the foundation. Just
Mhm.
if nothing else, for when I turn around and sell it, to say, "Hey, I have this engineer's report that says the foundation is good." When it comes to kind of talking to contractors as people are first meeting them, it's especially if you're a person who's just starting flips, it's very overwhelming because there's so many moving parts, even to a small remodel.
Mhm.
It's simple to look through and say, oh, we're going to do this bathroom and we'll do these cabinets over here. But as you know, like, okay, well, then what color are you going to do? And then what, you get to really the nitty gritty, and you want a contractor who's at least done a couple of, at least done some flips, and because they're out there and that they understand things like ROI. Like, if we do this, is it going to help your house sell for more? Is it going to help your house sell for faster? And then another big thing that I always tell people, and that is a big red flag, is if a contractor ever asks for more than 10% of a deposit, unless there's just a large amount of materials they need up front, that to me is a red flag.
Mhm.
Because if you're getting a 25-30% deposit, that generally is your margin for a construction company. And if you're working with investors, it tends to be higher than the margin. So then you're actually, as you finish the job, losing money. So for somebody like us, it's not that big of a deal, but we don't take the large deposit to begin with. We would always finish, as you know. But as you also know, there are some contractors that when they get towards the end, and if they're out of money, they won't finish that job. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's really crucial to stay on track. What we do with our clients is we give itemized bids, as you've seen. And when they're done, we ask for payment on a completion. And I recommend that to anybody to set that up with their contractor. And that's how most things should work is as things are done, then you pay for them. And you don't get a situation where like, man, I gave this contractor 40 or $50,000 and I'm sitting here with the house that's just down to the studs.
Yeah. Well, and I've also seen, now that you mentioned that, when you when somebody's not good at giving a good bid, or the contractor doesn't give you an unitemized bid like that, they probably don't really know how much work and energy and time it's going to take to do the stuff. So you'll
Yep.
get your job 90% of the way done, or 85% of the way done, and then you'll see them kind of drop off. And that makes a lot of sense after what you're talking about there, because if they've already spent all the money, or they budgeted too little to get this job done, once you get towards the end, it's going to get rough getting that job finished.
Yep, they end up in situations where they have to rob Peter to pay Paul kind of deal.
Mm.
And that snowballs really quick. So you're dead on about that. If they don't have things like an itemized bid and at least a minimal level of detail for you, then that also is a really really big red flag,
Hmm.
because you should know exactly what you're paying for.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know. I like to see that personally. You mentioned a little bit about modular housing. So funny that while we're recording this, I just did record an episode with one of the other partners on that deal, but I know you're doing some modular housing for a buddy of mine. Can you
Yep.
talk about what that is and what that looks like from a contractor's perspective? So what do you all have to do to get those ready? And I mean, I would assume as a layperson, not knowing anything about it, you assume they just bring in the modular housing and pop it down on the ground and you're done. Obviously,
Yeah.
it's more than that. What happens before that?
So far we can do this on either infill lots. You could do this in a subdivision. Uh, but what we've done so far is we found lots where there was basically tear downs. East Austin, South Austin, as you know, has quite a few of those. And then we also have one out west. And what we do is the first thing we do is go in, get city approval, roll up the utilities, knock the house down. And then one of the features about modulars is that they come pre-approved essentially. So things like rough inspections, going through planning for the city, which is a process that by itself can take 6 to 12 weeks, is entirely skipped. So after we knock down the house, we start. I won't get too far into details, too far into the nitty gritty, but essentially, we get the property prepared and the foundation ready for the modulars, and the modulars drop. And depending on which modular company you work with, there's a certain amount of work that we do inside. There's exterior that we do. There's landscaping, everything else. But it really is, the interesting thing is they are, they're pier and beam. So they brought in and they are lifted off of a crane and dropped into and placed together in place. And they have these setting crews that do it. It's fascinating to watch. Which I'd love to have you come out to one time.
Yeah.
And so they do that, and it could be 2 modulars, it could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 7. And once they're complete, you could not tell, almost anybody could not tell that they weren't anything but a stick built house. I've taken investors and construction people by, and to a person, that's what they've said. And the appeal, obviously, is you can get the ideas to get to the point where we're turning these around from close to putting a for sale sign on a new build house in 4 months, construction included. And as you know, a new build right now is probably more like 15 to 18 months if we're stick building.
Yeah, I think 18 months is safe. And then there's still delays. There's always delays and things are messed up, and you run into where the city's permits are taking forever. I had a client that bought a new build here recently, and it was taking them forever to put in a gas meter. And that was what delayed him moving in by several weeks. The home was finished, it was ready to go, but he didn't have any gas. So we couldn't move in. It was colder.
Where there was a duplex that we worked on earlier this year that we got a green tag from the city of Austin on January 15th to get our electricity turned on. And Austin Energy did not get that electricity turned on until early April.
Wow.
And it was all bureaucratic paperwork. Now, that was, I shouldn't say fortunately, because it wasn't fortunate for him, but that was without somebody living there. But you can imagine if that's somebody's house, waiting for 2.5 or 3 months to get the power turned on, or if it's somebody's project, they're paying holding costs on that. And that's one of the last things that happen. We're trying to get the power turned on because you have to pass your electrical final to make that happen. And so it's just, you're right. There are things about it that that create certain nightmares that modulars are going to really help bypass.
Yeah, people talk all about, how we need to build our way out of affordable housing, but the city doesn't really cooperate with that so much.
No, I think they've made it a little bit easier for ADUs in terms on the citywide level, but as far as going through inspections, honestly, the city inspections and the city permitting office isn't remotely as bad as dealing with Austin Energy or Texas Gas. And that's saying, and I actually haven't had terrible luck with the city outside of one specific inspector. But it is Austin Energy and the gas company that have given us fits left and right.
It's not fun.
No.
Well, yeah. So if you want to do it quickly and you want to do it at a better cost. It sounds like modular is going to be the way to go. I know that it's real early on in that game, and that you're probably going to have to wait a year or two before it's just widely and easily available. I would say at a minimum a year or two.
Yep.
But like Travis said, there's still lots of awesome opportunities to flip houses, to remodel houses. And then when they're tear downs, rather than rebuild it, sometimes it might just be modular. So you mentioned some new construction too. With you have some experience with these 15 to 18 months projects. What type of new construction projects are you guys up to?
So right now it's actually solely modular. We've finished up a couple in East Austin, that were stick build, traditional, actually not far from Ebert,
Hmm.
in the same neighborhood. And um, we actually were able to finish those from ground break to finish in 10 months each. But now, of course, like I said, the planning portion took a little bit longer. And those went really well. But that was the problem we had with those is there was such huge fluctuations with lumber companies, and we are a fixed bid company, as you know. I do not go back and ask for more money for the same line item, so we ended up having to eat about $30,000 in lumber.
Oh my gosh.
Because we honor our price, and so that the time from the time we had originally bid and did the plans until the time we broke ground and we're actually buying the lumber is when there was the biggest increase. And so we got whacked with that pretty hard. We still did okay on the house, but
Mhm.
I mean it was a little bit painful. But those have gone well. There's definitely a slowdown for right now as far as spec homes go,
Mm.
at least from my own anecdotal standpoint. I don't know about for other builders. There's other builders who are more into spec builds, um, that could give you some more insight. We definitely are heading towards being more into building, as you know, but the current circumstances have kind of slowed the momentum on that for right now.
Sure. With rising debt costs and uncertainty, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Travis, do you have a favorite business or mindset book you like to recommend?
I don't necessarily have a favorite business or mindset book, but I do really like macroeconomics, as we said, and I love Milton Friedman's monetary theory. I love I love things like unemployment rates and export import prices and commodities and weird
Hmm.
things like that. And so um, I will be honest, and I told you this before, that I have not really gotten a formal business education. I've learned it through blood, sweat, and tears over the last 5 years, building this, bootstrapping it from the ground up. I wish I would have read some books. I'm sure
Yeah.
there are some amazing ones that would have saved me a lot of time and trouble.
Hmm.
And that's something I would certainly like to get into as we get between the holidays and things naturally slow down just a little bit.
Awesome. Well, experience is a great teacher too. And I know you've just learned a ton over these last couple of years doing all sorts of flips and rehabs and new builds in Austin.
Yep.
Travis, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you or to follow you?
So we have an Instagram page. It's at Hammersmith underscore ATX. We also have a website, which is www.hammersmithtexas.com. And we have a Facebook page as well, Hammersmith Construction and Renovation LLC. All of it has years worth of projects, people, and a good track record of our work. And honestly, it's kind of cool to see how the company's grown looking back through those things. So,
That's awesome.
and then
Yeah.
of course, I can put out my phone number if you want, but
Yeah. Totally up to you. But
yeah, 361-935-2421. I love, as Jordan knows, I love talking business. I love talking macro, and I love helping investors. Even if I don't end up doing the construction for them, I like at least giving them an idea of what they should be looking for if they go with another contractor, which sometimes happens.
Yeah, no, I get that. Travis, last question we've got here today, and it's the most important question we ask. What is your favorite restaurant in Austin?
My favorite restaurant it's called the Italian Restaurant. It's off of South Congress and it's in a strip center, and you would never know, but you go inside and it has the best ambiance, and they do the pasta from scratch and all that there, and it's some of the best food I've eaten. That's my go-to spot right now.
It's called the Italian Restaurant.
Literally called the Italian Restaurant.
I'll have to check that out. I'm not too far from that spot.
Yeah, it's not far from you at all.
That's awesome, man. Well, cool. Thank you so much for coming on here today, Travis. Of course, follow them on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, guys. It's at Jordan_Moorhead, and Hammersmith ATX is the construction company.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, Jordan.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you here soon.
Yes, sir. Take care.